Years ago, I was backpacking a very remote section of the Grand Canyon. I was with two friends, and we were traveling off trail, ascending out of the canyon via an unnamed route. It was incredibly rugged and pushed us to our limits. As we topped out, I began seeing ancient artifacts littering the ground. I was shocked to find signs of life here, as I had no knowledge of a water source anywhere nearby. It seemed so random and out of place. We still had many miles to hike back to our vehicle, and we were running out of water, so I couldn't linger to investigate. But what I stumbled upon in this area has been cemented in my mind ever since. What civilization were these the remnants of? And how did they manage to survive here? These questions have haunted me, and I knew I had to return. Hey everybody, it's Andrew from Desert Drifter. Thanks for tuning in. I'm hiking on the rim of the Grand Canyon. If you only think of the canyon as a big ditch or a desert environment, you'd be missing half of the story. Here's old cell phone footage of a friend and I hiking out of the canyon in winter. You can see the snowdrifts were almost to our hips. The Grand Canyon is incredibly diverse, with a desert ecosystem at the bottom and a forested rim up top that gets significant precipitation. If you account for all of the twists and turns, there are literally hundreds of miles of Grand Canyon rim. You might be a stone's throw from the edge, but because of the forest and topography, you could be completely unaware there's a huge drop just a short ways away. Whatever I found out there years ago sits along this forested rim, not far from the edge of this natural wonder. But to get there today, it's going to take a lot of travel over some rough terrain. As I hiked, I reminisced over some of the events that led me to find this site in the first place. So when we were probably about 1,000 feet below the rim, we stopped to take a break. And lo and behold, I found a few small pieces of pottery. And it was clear, that was old pottery, 800 plus years old. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Here we are with our, ultralight backpacks and our, space age climbing rubber on our approach shoes and, yada, yada. We're getting all that we can handle. And here is some ancient person that's just climbing out of here with pots. I mean, it just, the level of awe and respect that it creates in you for, what the people in the past did in this region, and specifically the Grand Canyon. I mean, it's probably easier felt than said. Wow, okay. So I was literally just filming that, kind of talking, looking down, and voila. So right here, this is what caught my eye. And I know it probably looks just like all the limestone around it, but once you kind of develop an eye for it, you can just tell that's not rock, that's pottery. It's got equal thickness running throughout it. It's kind of got that curvature, right, that a pot or some vessel would have. If that was all that was here, I mean, maybe I'd be like, I don't know. And then you've got, again, really, really tiny little chunk here. Rounded lip here. Another piece here. Oh, there you go. Look, black on white. That for sure, if there's any doubt still remaining. Rocks do not look like that. Next to that one, you got that. And I mean, it just goes on and on. it's just so cool, you know? I think like one of my first reactions is the same as last time, where like there's so many different styles of pottery out here. If it was, you know, if it's just one type or a few pieces scattered, you know, it's like, okay, that's still kind of cool. Like what were they doing out here? But I mean, there's a lot and a lot of different types. This was one of my major questions and reasons for returning. What exactly had I stumbled on out here? Was this some prehistoric trade route into the canyon? Or was there a large, once thriving community hidden somewhere in these woods? Wandered around about the last 20 minutes. Found some interesting things. Let me show you guys. So check out what I found laying right here. Isn't that amazing? Big chunk of black on white with some really beautiful designs. I just love imagining, you know, the work that went into making something like this. You know, just the individual brush strokes. Probably using like a yucca paintbrush, you know, and drawing these paint lines here. Just to think it's still in this kind of shape out here for us to marvel at. Of course, leave it where you find it. This piece was an interesting clue. I'm not an expert, but this is likely an example of what's known as Tucson whiteware. It was a type of pottery circulated in this region for about 600 years, roughly 700 to 1300 AD. There are subcategories to Tucson whiteware, and I believe I'm finding a couple different styles out here. If that's the case, it shows this area was used over a longer period of time. Oh wow, that's the first black on red I've seen here. So here's corrugated, meaning it's got these kind of indentations on it. And this was generally like the utility cookware, you know, kind of the everyday stuff. What is this? More corrugated. You know, the stuff with designs and colors would be, you know, maybe like our modern day china, or, you know, when you bring out the nicer stuff. When we take something like this from the land, it steals the opportunity for the average person to find it and marvel at it. It also prevents future generations of professionals from studying and learning from the surface of this site. These artifacts are disappearing at an alarming rate across the Southwest. Let's do our part to keep them around for future generations. So when I first came on the site, I was like, you know, kind of surprised because it all looked like uneven to me. And I was like, what, you know, like who's living on this uneven ground? But then, you know, I looked a little closer and I realized there's a few pretty small, but definitely flat impressions out here in the ground. And those flat impressions are also where there's a higher concentration of the pottery. And perhaps most significant of all is this kind of circle of rocks, which looked to me like it could be the outline of an old pit house. I mean, yes, it doesn't look particularly impressive now, but you can tell those were definitely stacked at one point in time. You know, it comes around in a very clear circle. There's more rocks up under that tree. That juniper's kind of grown up over it. So, this thing caught my eye down on the ground. If you look at all those little ridges down there, I think it's a little fossil brachiopod, which is like an ancient clam shell of sorts. So, ancient seashell from when all this was underwater at one point in time. This was an interesting spot. It was the first clear evidence I had found of possible long-term habitation here. I pushed on, getting closer to the edge. So I was walking and was like, this looks like an unnatural semicircle of rocks. And maybe 25 yards up from where the other one is, much bigger, but more of an obvious circle here. And this is quite a bit bigger. I mean, this is probably 15 feet in diameter. More small pot shards scattered about. I believe these stone structures are the remnants of pit houses. As people transition from a purely nomadic lifestyle to one with more permanence, these structures began to appear. It does seem like there's a bit of a trend here, doesn't there? About 50 yards further, take a look at this. Obviously, whatever it was has been beaten down by the elements and buried partially. But it does seem like it was some kind of a actual above ground structure at one point in time. You know, possibly start of a wall there, the outline of, you know, former building all the way, you know, along here, terminating over here under, once again, a juniper. I was surprised to find the remnants of a structure so large, but perhaps I shouldn't have been. It reminded me of other old foundations I'd come across in this region. I'd estimate the footprint of this one to be 40 to 50 feet long and 20 to 25 feet wide. Seems like possibly some more outlying buildings, you know, more rubble mounds. The picture was becoming more clear, but I still had questions to answer. Wow, yeah, there is a lot scattered around these rubble mounds. It's pretty neat. Pretty big chunk of a corrugated vessel here. The amount of pottery these folks had, significant. I always wonder what their lives were like. It's just lichen, but I walked by this rock and was kind of like creeped out. I was like, oh, something's staring at me. So I've been moving around, you know, finding a bunch of sites, just pottery everywhere. So I started slowing down and found something pretty cool over here. So, definite point here. Let's see if I can get the camera to focus on this. Given its size, definitely like a small game point. Some mud back here. So look at that tip. There's like part of it broken off, and I wonder if while the guy was making this, that broke on him and he just discarded this. There's just been chert flakes all over the place here, and so I've just been combing it so slowly, and finally paid off. Okay, we might have another find here. Let's see. Yeah, that is definitely a point. Now, it's clearly been broken here. Looks like it was probably pretty good size, maybe more like a spear point. Look at this little guy. I don't actually know what he is. I thought he was a toad at first with that fat body, but he was moving so quick. He ran straight to this cacti. He knows nobody wants to go in there after him. Got some skeletal remains over here. Looks like a pelvis with some hip sockets. Probably a deer. Man, this place is rich. How could you miss this glinting in the sun like it is? I think it's broken, but it definitely looks like something here. It's definitely not a great specimen, but you can definitely still see the makings of this notch here, a couple of these edges. It was something. The Grand Canyon doesn't give up its secrets easily, but I was starting to understand what was going on here. When I first passed through this site years ago, I saw no evidence of permanent occupation. I wondered if it were only a travel route, or perhaps short-term hunting camps. Both of those could still be realities, but clearly this spot was also lived in for a significant amount of time. Given the pottery, one of the people groups who called this place home were the ancestral Puebloans. But I'd bet there's more human history here than that. I came across one site with a large amount of decaying wood in a pile. I immediately thought of a Paiute Wickiup or Navajo Hogan. This could be the remains of one of those, and if so, maybe from the 1800s. Another mystery to me was how might people sustain life here without a water source nearby? Of course, it's possible a spring could have dried up, but there could be another explanation. I wasn't being dramatic when I said I've thought a lot about this spot over the years. At one point, I read something in a book titled I Am Grand Canyon that I thought could solve part of the mystery. This book is the story of the Havasupai people, who still live in the Grand Canyon today. They are famous for owning on their reservation perhaps the most beautiful place in the entire world, Havasupai Falls. The book describes the traditional Havasupai way of life. They farmed extensively in the canyon during the warmer months, and then migrated onto the rim during wintertime. On the rim, they hunted and foraged in the pinyon and juniper forests, just like this one. But the catch is that because it was wintertime, there was snow on the ground, and they used that for water. This allowed them to live someplace they otherwise couldn't have. I found this very interesting because I had always assumed the native peoples would live on the rim in the summer, where it's much cooler and more comfortable, and down in the canyon during the colder months. In the summer, the temperature at the bottom of the Grand Canyon can reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit or more. At the same time, it might only be 80 degrees Fahrenheit on the rim. On the flip side, winter temperatures at the bottom are usually pretty mild, while on the rim, well, we've already covered that. But this migration pattern worked for the Havasupai, and maybe that was common for the people who came before them. Could these structures I came across have only been lived in during the winter? Maybe. Were herds of animals hunted up here, which would account for the large amount of projectile points I found? Probably. Either way, people have lived here for a long time. Before I could leave, there was one more thing I had to do here. So when my friends and I were cutting across country after getting out of the canyon, I had mentioned I found this arrowhead, and I left it under a tree and I put a GPS pin, and kind of thought, if I ever make it back here someday, I'll have to see if I can find it again. And I did a couple circles, but sure enough, eventually I spotted it. So after I found it, I remember I went home and I did a little bit of research to try to figure out what time period this sort of like teardrop shaped point came from. And honestly, I don't remember what I found. If anybody knows, drop a comment. Would love to hear. I think I'll have to go home and try to look that up again. Well, I'll put it back, and who knows, maybe I'll be out here another time. If you want more Desert Drifter, exclusive content, giveaways, and unique community, consider checking out my new Patreon page. My hope is that through avenues like this, it will open the opportunities for me to explore further into more unique and remote places. The shadows are getting long. So, that being said, I think I'm gonna have to come back another day, another time, another trip, my friends. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something new, maybe about the Grand Canyon region and all the human history here. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.